Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification Course. If you're here joining us at the headquarters here in Clyde, Texas / Abilene, Texas, please be seated. If you're joining us online, thank you for joining us. And wherever you are in the world, we are going to continue tonight in the parenting manual of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, a hands-on approach. If you're watching on the Facebook page, you can go to the top of the page and you can hit, there's a drop-down menu for the books, the manuals that we're teaching out of. We're in the parenting manual, of course, and feel free to download it and follow along with us. Also, feel free to share it wherever you can, because it's desperately needed right now in this world, as we can see with all the headlines that we've been reading lately. Okay, so and we're learning about teaching children about respect. That's the chapter we're in, chapter 8, and it's found on page 61. If you're wondering where we are. Okay, so David was the last teacher, and he had already covered page 61. He covered page 62, and he made it up to, I believe, page 63, where we'll be covering. But of course, we always like to go back and rehearse the last class, and of course, you know how the Animal Planet, I think they have Shark Week, every year. This week, we got to focus on a really important, some important events that took place about 80 years ago this week that illustrate, underline, emphasize, and highlight the reason the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program needs to diligently be taught to children and parents. Since we're talking about respect and we're talking about teaching respect, if you go to page 61, I want to remind you of the definition of respect as stated in the parenting program. Michael, can we get this monitor on here too? It says respect is to show honor, esteem, care, and concern for others, and it's a pillar. It says respect is to show honor, esteem, care, and concern for others, property, the environment, ourselves, and all life. Okay, so hopefully you've underlined that or you've highlighted it in some way because there's a lot there that we're going to be covering in the next two classes regarding this word respect and regarding the condition of the world today. I was just telling Michael that myself and him were born one day apart in 1962, and I was born on November 6th. He was born on November 5th, and that was, a week after the Cuban Missile Crisis officially ended on October 29th, 1962, and hat tip to our comrades over in the Soviet Union that practiced self-control, that decided, not to launch the nuclear missiles off the coast of Cuba there, even though they were being pressured to do so. They called it, if you remember, you can go online, read, and you can watch a documentary called The Man Who Saved the World. His name was Vasil Arkhipov. He was a Russian submariner who they said had a lot of self-control. Obviously, he did. It was like 100 and something degrees down there in the sub. They lost power for like over a week or two, and they were hot. They had no communication with the Soviets over in where they launched from in Russia, and they didn't know. They heard all these explosions going on up above them, which were like depth charges that the United States was doing to try to draw them up to make them surface. And they didn't know if a war was going on or they were trying to kill them. And they were being pressured to launch that missile. And Vasil Arkhipov was the third. There had to be 3 that agreed. He didn't agree to do it, and here we are today. So we owe it to our comrades a thanks there in Russia. And that ain't the only time the Russians saved us from nuclear war. There was another incident in 1983 where Stanislav Petrov, he was Stanislav Petrov. He was manning one of those ICBM watching stations, and he thought he was witnessing a major attack by the United States on his radar, and he realized he had to make a choice. Are we being attacked, or is this just some kind of like mistake or some kind of glitch in the system? And once again, a Russian made the decision not to launch and retaliate. Okay? You know, those mean, evil Russians, you know, that we're all told about, actually saved the world there twice in my lifetime. So just remember that when you think of those Russians, you know. I think when they say Russian, they're not Russian to make judgments. We're the ones that are Russian in America, rushing to make judgments and rushing to war, rushing to swift at our feet to rush to go to war with everyone at the drop of a hat. And, you know, that peaceful solution, that's why it's so important to learn about respect, as we're going to learn tonight. So having said that, given you that definition of respect, let me turn back over here to Lesson Plan 8, page A, 8A. We are going to be on step, we're actually on step 6, and I will read that, but I'm going to have to go back and rehearse a little bit tonight of some of the things that David covered, because they're very important for what we're learning this week. But on step 6, it says, read the section it starts with you on page 63, then allow students to take the test on page 64. Encourage them to answer each scenario honestly. This assignment is for each individual to evaluate themselves. It will not be shared with the class. Read the section Analyzing Your Respect IQ on page 65 and have students take note of their areas of concern. Encourage them to continue to strive to obtain the very important character trait of respect for themselves and others. And as David was pointing out in his last session, you know, you don't read those steps to your students. Okay, we're reading them here only because, you know, we're taking a certification course. But if you're in a classroom, you wouldn't be reading that, or in a class setting, you wouldn't be reading that to your students. That's just a guideline for you. Okay, it's a guideline for the teacher to keep them on, you know, on the path of what this procedure is trying, the purpose objective of the lesson is. So just remember everything he said in the last class about that. So let's go to, I have a visual, I think, and I think it's found on page 61. So if you turn to page 61 again on lesson 8, there's a statement there that we need to get in our mind at the bottom there of page 61. These are just a few facts. It says, by the age of 72, the average American would have spent a total of 11 years in front of a TV. 11 years, man. And I don't remember, I remember bringing before, I remember, and you can keep that slide up while I'm yapping. I remember before I brought some facts about how many years we sleep out of our life. I don't remember exactly how many years out of your life you sleep. Does anybody remember those facts? Was it 7 years? 10 years? It was a lot of years that we actually sleep. Because remember, about a third of your life you're sleeping. Because you sleep at least 8 hours a day, so a third of your life would be sleeping. You might need less sleep nowadays, I don't know. If you're like me, I seem to need more sleep lately for some reason. I don't know what's going on with me, but anyway, you spend about a third of your life sleeping, and then you spend another 11 years in front of a TV. I hope no one here is spending 11 years in front of their life in front of a TV. But I actually believe now, because they have the advent of the smartphone, it's probably a lot more now, because you can carry the TV in your pocket You can put it in your pocket and carry it around and pull it out. And most people have one in front of their face 18, 20 hours a day from what I've seen. It seems like they're always looking at it. Okay, so probably exaggerating a little bit, but I'm known to do that. Okay, so the second bullet point says by the age of 18, the average child would have witnessed over 200,000 acts of violence. That probably seems a little low when Chris was talking about that one movie where there was like 2,000 acts of violence. I remember The Matrix in the Building Moral Excellence Unit. There was 1,000 something acts of violence in that one movie. I think it was a 90-minute movie or something like that. So, seeing violence over and over and over and over again, what it does to the mind. We've talked about it. We've gone over it quite a bit. And then that third point says teens that watch 3 to 5 hours of TV each week witness about 2,000 sex acts a year. 2,000 acts of sex per year, it says. And again, I think that's a low number right now. I think now with the advent of the smartphone, they're probably seeing thousands more every year. Okay, because again, they can just pull it right out of their pocket, start scrolling through TikTok or whatever they like to scroll through, and they're seeing one after another, sex acts and things they should not be laying their eyes on, things that there shouldn't be registered in their minds like that. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Remember, we're doing a little review here. Now on page 62, if you'll flip over to page 62, this is what we're really going to focus on right now because there's a statement made here that we really need to get in our mind. It says, as parents, we can no longer afford to be desensitized to the disrespect in the world around us. And I underline this, and I want you to underline it as well in your book. We need to become aware of how it is affecting our children and us. This disrespect, we need to become aware. We need to wake up. Somebody needs to dump a big bucket of ice on our head. Okay? Because you know why? Right now on the news, there's talk of nuclear war as if there's like no problem. We can survive this thing. We're going to send a couple subs over here with some missiles. And they're putting fear in one another. Okay? And when people get afraid, they tend to do some things that they wouldn't do if they weren't. So all this talk of nuclear war and threatenings and things like this show that we have become totally desensitized. I remember recently seeing a film where Japanese children were asked what took place on August 6, 1945 in Japan. And not one of them could answer. Not one of them could answer. With one of the most horrific events of the 21st century, nobody could answer. They didn't know that Hiroshima had been the victim of an atomic bomb on that date. Nor did they know that Nagasaki, Japan, had been hit 3 days later. Neither did most people even consider Tokyo was firebombed a few months before that, and it was worse than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where 100,000 people were killed, incinerated by bombs. Thousands of bombs. So this is why this is telling us right here, we need to become aware of how it's affecting our children and us. Watching these acts of violence, watching these acts of war taking place that are desensitizing us and making us not realize that this is what it's leading to. These actions, the sex acts that they're watching, the things that we're putting in our minds are leading to the things that I'm talking about right now, those nuclear launches. It says, to become truly effective in our role as parents, we must acknowledge the dangers of allowing children to watch objectionable material on TV read about it in books and magazines, and see it on the internet. We should never underestimate the power of negative influences on the moral development of our children, but we do. We do. I keep hearing people say, well, it's really, my child's not watching that. My child's not watching that. It's everybody else. It kind of reminds me of the parents that always say, my child, he was such a good boy or such a good girl, and then she started running with the wrong crowd, She started running with, he or she, my little Snookums started running with the wrong crowd, and then they turned into a drug addict, or they turned into a, some kind of gang member or something. But they started hanging with the wrong crowd. You notice their child's never the wrong crowd, right? It's everybody else's child that was the wrong crowd. How do you know your child wasn't the one that someone else started hanging around and getting negatively influenced by, right? How do you know that? Why is it always the other parent's fault, the other child's fault? Remember, birds of a feather flock together, right? Isn't that what it says? All right. Now, it says, continuing in our reading, remember, parents have the most important job on the planet. We are responsible for raising, nurturing, and teaching the next generation. With so much depending on our diligence, you see that word diligence? With so much depending on our diligence, that means carefully watching and guarding our children, because I told you the last time I spoke, it is our obligation to guard our house, to not allow certain things in our environment, in our child's environment. We cannot make excuses and say that, well, my child asked for that, so I gave it to him. Well, why did you give it to him? Why did you buy it for him? You are the one that determines whether they should have it or whether they shouldn't. So don't blame your child. We need to start growing up and being the guardians of our homes, of our environments, parents. It says, with so much depending on our diligence, we cannot afford to be negligent in our duties. You see that? Don't take these words lightly. Don't take them lightly. It's showing you that we have a duty, our duty. I know that sounds like a war word, right? Call of Duty? Yeah. Why did that come to your mind? Why did that come to my mind? Because it's influence, right? Call of Duty. Now when we think of duty, we think, Call of Duty. Yeah, I played that. Right? No, that's not our duty to learn war. It's our duty to guard our children from Call of Duty, from even desiring to play something like that. Why do they even have the desire to go that way, right? We can eliminate that desire through practice of the peaceful solution, and practicing self-control, learning to watch, learning what negative thoughts are, what positive thoughts are, the power of positive thinking and the power of those negative influences. If we can learn those things and we can start practicing them and we instill them in the young ones, guess what? They're going to be aware, they're going to be more aware than they are if you don't teach them anything, right? That's why education is key. It says, we cannot afford to be negligent in our duties. It's a parent's responsibility to guard what their children see, hear, and experience to the very best of their ability. Do you see that? Do you see that? It is your duty. It is my duty to guard our children from what they see, hear, and experience. It's our duty. We don't leave it up to them. Where are you leaving it up to them? It's your house. It's your child. Your child belongs to you. Do you know that? Didn't we learn that? Didn't we learn about ownership in the Building Moral Excellence Unit about your children belong to you? Do you remember that? They belong to you. Yes, I know it's kind of strange to think this way, but you own your child. You know how I know that? When your child gets lost, they look for the parent that owns the child, who they belong to, right? You know how else I know that? If somebody takes your child without your permission, that's called kidnapping. And it's a big offense, and you can get a lot of time in prison for that, right? So people understand that children are owned by their parents, that they belong to somebody. They do have that understanding even in the laws of the land. So, yes, your children belong to you, and you can make decisions for your children. You don't let your children make all the decisions for themselves, okay? If you're doing that, you need to wake up and stop making excuses and giving your children so much leeway. Now, can you make all their decisions for them as far as what they do or don't do once you teach them what's right and wrong? No. But you have an obligation to teach them right from wrong. And you have an obligation when you see that they're bringing things into your home that they shouldn't be bringing there, to make sure that they get out of your home, because they shouldn't have never been in there in the first place. And if you're afraid to do that, then you are neglecting your obligation as a parent. You are not fulfilling your obligation as a parent. You're not being courageous. Remember, that's a positive character trait. Being courageous, standing up for what's right. You need to learn to have a backbone. Learn to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to allow this in my home. No, I'm not going to allow this in your environment. Okay? I told you about my sister. She did the same thing. My sister tried to guard her environment against that music. She tried and tried and tried, and finally her son ended up in prison for murder, because the music he was listening to had an effect on him. And he'll tell you himself, it was the music, it was the lyrics, it was the attitude that came from that landed him where he went. And his mother tried everything she could. So nobody here can tell me that can't have an effect on someone where they commit murder. Okay? Nobody here will be able to tell me that, and nobody here will be able to tell that young man that came and testified to the Peaceful Solution about that very thing. No one will be able to convince him that didn't affect him. Okay? He knows that it did. And now he's more careful about what he allows in his head. So we need to be more adamant about these things. I don't think we really need to, because we should see right now we're on the verge of nuclear annihilation. Why is that? It's because we don't have people being taught these moral principles anymore, okay? And we need to really engrave in the minds of the people the importance of teaching this, because if we don't. So let's go to the next, I think I had another, did I finish that? Yeah, I did. Okay, so on page 62, is page 62? Yeah, on page 62 at the bottom, remember, we're doing a little bit of review of what David had taught. It says, just because society accepts it doesn't mean it's respectable, right? Does that mean it's respectable just because they show your children machine guns and bank robberies and sex acts and all that? Does that make it respectable because they show it on television, or because they allow it on all the social media and the internet? And does that make it respectable? No, it doesn't. It tells you right here what respect is. Again, it means to show honor, esteem, care, and concern for others, property, the environment, ourselves, and all life. It's not showing respect when you're pointing a gun at somebody. I'm sorry, it's just not. It's showing that you hate that person. It's showing that you have hatred in your heart, that you're a murderer. Got it? Very simple. Oh, but it's just a toy. I got it at Toys R Us. It doesn't really work. I mean, if he points it at his friend, it's not going to hurt him. He's just pretending. Yeah, I know, that's where it starts. So why would you even want your child to pretend? Why would you want your child to pretend they're killing somebody when you wouldn't want them to kill somebody in real life when they grow up, right? So why are you training them now to want to pick up a gun and point it at somebody? You see, this is what Israel Hawkins tried to get across to us for many, many years. It's where it leads to. It's where these things lead to. It's where that toy gun leads to. Those toy guns and those toy soldiers and those, G.I. Joes and G.I. Janes and everything else they came up with, they it's what it leads to. It leads to that nuclear explosion or atomic explosion in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? It's what it leads to. All right, so let's go back to, let's see, let's go to the next visual. Okay, so what I want you to do now is turn back to page 47, because I want to illustrate something to us about rules. On page 47, which was, I believe, chapter 6 of this booklet here, there was a few rules about developing rules, and the very top rule said, make sure that rules are thoroughly considered and evaluated before they're implemented in order to avoid confusing a child. When rules are not clear, not only are the children confused, they're more apt or likely to resist them. Now, you know what we could have added right there? Can you please keep that up, please? I want everyone to look at that, what it says right there. See that word resist? Resist. Rebel. Fight. Fight against it. Don't submit to the rule. Fight against it. Well, it's saying that make sure the rules are thoroughly considered and evaluated before they're implemented. Well, you know what we better also do? We better thoroughly explain them. We better not change them. We better not add to or subtract to them, because that confuses a child too. If you don't believe me, it's confused the whole world right now because of this very thing that I'm talking about. The whole world is confused. They're confused about war. They're confused. What I'm going to aim to do right now is, when I said that word aim, what did you think? Did you think of a gun? Did you think of me picking up a pistol and aiming it when I said the word aim? No, not you, because you're being trained in the peaceful solution. But, you know, to somebody else, that would be like a trigger word. You hear that word trigger? What did it remind you of? When I said trigger, did it remind you of the horse that Roy Rogers used to ride, or did it remind you of the trigger on a gun? Right? You know, we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned. We've been brainwashed. No, we've been brain sludged. Right now, you're being brainwashed. You're having your little brains taken and scrubbed and making nice and clean, getting all that filth out, you know, that garbage that Hollywood taught us. We're getting all that out. So, let me illustrate how this takes place. Let me show you how simple this is. Let's go to the next slide about how we can confuse somebody. Now, these children here, you notice they have these confused looks on their faces. For the audience that can't see these pictures, those are looks of a confused child. This word confusion, you remember how your teacher used to tell you, now break the word down, Johnny, break the word down. Confusion. All right? Everybody got it? All right, let's read the etymology. The etymology is the genesis, or the where did this word come from? Let's look at the word confusion. It says the word confusion is derived from the Latin word confusia, which means a mingling together, disorder, or chaos. It traces its roots back to the Proto-Indo-European root word "q," which signifies to mix. You ever heard like somebody's all mixed up, right? I'm all mixed up. That means I'm confused. Okay? So The idea, and I want you to keep that picture up there because I want you to see those confused looks on those children's faces, because the whole world is confused right now about something. And you know, the peaceful solution, the great thing about the peaceful solution is, if you're confused, we can set you straight. we can actually get you on the right path and give you the information so you won't be confused anymore about this word war and confusion. So confusion, it just means to mix, or an admixture. So when you have a rule, right? When you have a rule and you start adding things into that rule, let me give you an example. So you remember I told you that I used to sit down with my parents and watch getaway movies, like bank robbery movies and stuff. We would watch them together. And sometimes, you know, the parents would start clapping because, you know, they like the person, the actor or whatever. But my parents set a rule: do not steal. You know, my parents used to teach me not to steal. They used to teach me, you know, basic moral rules. But yet when certain things were being done in these Hollywood movies, you know, they were clapping for these bad things that were being done. And I was kind of like, wow, okay. Like if I did that, I wouldn't get applaud. Probably get a spanking, right? Do you see right there how simple it is to mix? Yes or no? Shake your head. Let me know you're awake out there. I know it's kind of hot. But do you see when I'm talking about mixing? That's how easy it is to mix. All you got to do is give a child a rule and then do something totally opposite, or show them something totally opposite as an example in your own behavior. And I'm not saying parents know they're doing that. I'm telling you they're confused. They don't know that that's what they're doing. They're actually mixing. They're getting their child mixed up. And the child's like, so you're telling me not to do this, but you yourself are doing that. You know what that makes them? They start to get frustrated, and it builds into anger when they see that we do that very thing, right? Because they haven't had their senses trained to be able to, you know, like realize, and they don't have all the understanding that, well, you know, just because the parents are doing that doesn't necessarily mean they know they're doing something wrong. It just means it's a lack of education. The child doesn't know that, but the child lets that build up within them. There's a resentment that comes from that. There's a resentment that starts to build up in the child where they start to think, you hypocrite, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to resist you. I'm going to resist you. I'm going to do everything I can to let you know that I don't care about what you say. Because they see the hypocrisy. You know, think about it for a minute. The author of The Peaceful Solution, back in the 2001 when the World Trade Center took place, the attacks on the World Trade Center, he said, you know, why do we tell our children that two wrongs don't make a right? And then when somebody attacks us, we want to go launch a war against the country. Like, how is that going to make it right? If we do wrong because somebody else did wrong, is that going to make it right? Is that going to make it right? Is that going to solve the problem? Launch some planes and go bomb some enemies? Enemies? Who gets bombed, man? Who's starving right now in Gaza? Is it a bunch of Hamas soldiers? Unless they're little infants. I guess those infants I'm seeing that are bony and skin, those are soldiers. No, it's people get caught up in these wars. You know, people get caught up in these spats between world leaders that haven't been taught respect, like we're trying to instill right now, like we're trying to teach right now. Consideration and care for all life, property. It's not showing consideration when we drop bombs on people's property, is it? Can you imagine trying to sleep in one of these places? Like, can you imagine? Can you even sleep? How can you even sleep when you hear all these bombs dropping and you think that might be my house next? How can you even sleep? I don't see how they can. And it must just be a horrible mental trauma. And then not only that, so they drop them food, they drop them supplies because they care so much about them. And then as soon as the people gather for supplies, they drop bombs on the supplies. Like they treat them like a bunch of rats. They trap the rats and then they kill them. This is what we're doing in the world right now. And the whole world is watching this. The whole world is watching it. Some people are standing up and saying, this is wrong. Why are we doing this? Why are we enabling this? Why is the United States sending support? Why are we enabling it? Why are we pretending that we're not when we are? But some people, there's a lot of people out there that are standing up against it that they're considering, well, how would I feel if that was me? Or how would I feel if that was my child? Because they have care for people. They care about people. Okay? And some of them, yes, they watch violence on TV and they go to films that are violent and they don't really, because remember, I told you they're confused. They don't even know why they're going to these things, and then they stand up against them sometimes. It's called confusion at its best. Let's go to the next slide. I think I finished that slide. Okay, yeah, so here's the next, I'm breaking the word down for us. Remember, confuse? That word con, right? When you think of a con, right? It's like to persuade someone to do or believe something, typically by use of a deception. To get someone to believe something, it says, this is from dictionary.com, it says, to persuade someone, the word con, it means to persuade someone to do or believe something, typically by use of a deception. Like deceiving them into thinking that war is honorable. Like war is great. Killing your enemy is a courageous deed, young man. Right? Join the U.S. Army, be all you can be. Right? Now the word fuse, confuse, or confusion. The word fuse means to join or blend, to form a single entity. So to join or blend. So when you put something in a blender, what is it doing? It's mixing. It's mixing, right? It's mixing. You're mixing it together. You're mixing a concoction, like this witch here. She's making that witch's brew. See it? She's probably put some things that are edible in there, right? She might have put a piece of chicken, but then she added frog head, frog legs. Well, I don't know what witches put in their concoctions, but some of the things. Toad warts. Yeah, toad warts. That's something I wouldn't want in my stuff, right? Would you? So it's a mixture. There's probably some things in there that are edible, and there's some things that would make you throw up, right? That you would never want in your stuff. But that's what the word confuse means. Con means you're being tricked or you're being deceived into thinking something is okay. And fuse means to mix or blend together, to make it one, to join it. So let's go to the next slide. So when you think of the word fusion, when I think of the word fusion nowadays, I think of fusion bombs. You know what a fusion bomb is? It's called a thermonuclear hydrogen weapon that they have right now, thousands of them waiting to launch. It says, what's the difference? This article says, what's the difference between a hydrogen bomb and an atomic bomb? It says, simply speaking, experts say a hydrogen bomb is the more advanced version of the atomic bomb. it says you have to master the atomic bomb first. An atomic bomb uses either uranium or plutonium and relies on fission, a nuclear reaction in which a nucleus of an atom breaks apart into two pieces. To make a hydrogen bomb, one would still need uranium or plutonium as well as two other isotopes of hydrogen called deuterium and tritium. The hydrogen bomb relies on fusion, which is the process of taking two separate atoms and putting them together to form a third atom. Quote, the way the hydrogen bomb works, it's really a combination of fission and fusion together. See the mix? Shake your head if you're still awake. You see the mix? You see you had to mix something, right? It doesn't just occur naturally in nature, right? To make that huge explosion. It says, in both cases, a significant amount of energy is released, which drives the explosion, experts say. However, more energy is released during the fusion process, which causes a bigger blast. Quote, the extra yield is going to give you more bang, it says. That picture right there was, I believe that's Ivy Mike, probably the first hydrogen bomb exploded. You see that mushroom cloud? That makes the Hiroshima bomb look like a picnic. That was in 1951. That's, 60, 70 years ago? 74 years ago? But notice you have to mix. Let's go to the next slide. So the word war, and I know I've showed this before, but I'm going to show it to you again because I don't want you to be confused about because the world is confused about war right now. I told you that, but you shouldn't be because you've been in the peaceful solution training for, many years now. But it says the word war, the etymology of the word war, it means to confuse. It means to mix up. Bring into confusion, it says. That's what the word war means. You see that? It means to confuse. It says Romanic, not romantic, Romanic, Roman people, it says. It says Romanic peoples turned to Germanic for a war word, possibly to avoid the Latin word bellum. Bellum, B-E-L-L-U-M, bellum. Because they said it was too close to the word bella, which means beautiful. So they opted for a different word so they didn't get it confused with a word that meant war, right? So they opted for the word bellum. Bellum means war. War means confusion. It means to bring into confusion. Okay? And this picture here from Wikipedia, it talks about the just war theory. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the just war theory. Just war theory means that war is acceptable if your enemy crosses the line, so to speak. And I'm going to show you how the world got tricked into thinking that war is acceptable, because what did we learn about the word moral? Wait, let's go back here. We know that moral means something that's right, doesn't bring harm to anybody, right? Does anybody remember that? Go back to page 61 again, and let's look at the definition of the word respect so we don't get confused. Respect means to show honor. Now, I want you to think of dropping a bomb on somebody when we give you these definitions. To show honor, esteem, care and concern for others, property, the environment, and ourselves in all life. Does that match with war? No, it doesn't. You don't see war anywhere in there, do you? You don't see any indication that respect would imply war in any way, shape, or form as defined in the peaceful solution. So let's go back to that slide. So this just war, Just meaning righteous, like a righteous war. You know, like back in when Pearl Harbor was bombed, the president gave a speech, and he said, we're going to take the righteous might of America, and we're going to go attack those Japanese, and we're going to end this war once and for all. That was after Pearl Harbor was attacked. He used the word righteous might, meaning this is a just war. They attacked us, so now we're going to go get them. We're in the right. We're justified. We're justified in our retaliation. Now, question, does two wrongs make a right? No, it doesn't. So, was this going to solve the problem? Not really, right? So let's continue. Just war. Now, you know who actually propagated this idea? A guy named St. Augustine. Tells you right there in the article that he was the first clear advocate of just war theory in Western thought and in Western idea. St. Augustine, it says. So let's go to the next slide. I want to show you this. This is a picture of, and because right now we're going to focus on America and how did we get the idea that war is okay? Okay. And everybody knows the founding father of America's name was George Washington, right? Does everybody know that? Okay, great. This is a picture here of what's called the Washington Square Arch in Manhattan, New York City. When you look through it, you used to be able to see the Twin Towers standing there. Now you probably only see the One World Trade Center since those two were knocked down in an act of war, which we retaliated for, and we're still retaliating for to this day. But on that arch, there's a carving. It's called the Washington Square Arch because it's in honor of George Washington, the first president of the United States, who they call the father of the nation, right? And I want you to read what this says. It says, the outcome, what's written on the arch is, in Latin, it says, exitus acta probat, which means the outcome justifies the deeds. Or, war is just as long as the outcome justifies what those rotten people did to us. Let me read you what it says here. The outcome justifies the deeds. Exitus acta probat is a Latin phrase that translates to the outcome justifies the deeds. It implies that a successful outcome can excuse any wrongs committed in the process of achieving it. This phrase is attributed to Ovid in his work Herodotus and is often associated with the idea that the ends justify the means. Additionally, it has been linked to the some of these words are like really hard to pronounce, but it's like Machiavellian like type word. Machiavelli, although he does not use the exact phrase in his writings, the phrase is also noted as a family motto. Get this, the phrase exitus acta probat, the outcome justifies the deeds, is the motto of the George Washington family. It's a family motto of theirs, emphasizing that the real, or what does it say? I can't see that word very clearly, but yeah, the end pre-exists. What's it say? The end pre-exists in the means, right? Okay, in other words, it's saying that the ends justify the means. In other words, if my enemy did something to me and I, let's say, knocked down a couple of trade centers, right? Then I'm justified for doing so because after all, when it's all said and done, even if I slaughtered 3,000 people, hey, you know, the ends meaning those two trade centers falling and 3,000 people being killed, it justifies the means. It's justified. It's just war. All's fair in love and war, right? Isn't that, you heard that before? Is that true? I don't hear anybody, so I don't know if anybody's awake. Oh, okay. So it's not true. It's just one of those sayings, kind of like, what you don't know won't hurt you, right? You heard that one too, right? What you don't know won't hurt you. But I'm showing you right now what they don't know is hurting them. That's what I'm showing you right now. What they don't know is hurting them. And it's fixing to hurt them in a really big way. Okay? Because they all believe that war is justified. Many, many billions of people on the earth right now think that war is justifiable in some circumstances. But in the peaceful solution, there's no circumstance where war is justified. Have you ever read it yet? Have you ever read anywhere in the peaceful solution where it says, if that rotten guy right there or that rotten girl right there, if she does something, if she crosses this line right here, then you have a right to slap her silly or slap him silly? Do you ever read that? No, you haven't, because it's not there. Have you ever read that you have the right to steal from somebody if they steal from you? No, I haven't seen that. I haven't. In fact, there's nothing you'll find anywhere in the Peaceful Solution Program that even implies such a thing. We're supposed to be harmless to everybody. Everything. Respect for all life. All right, so let's go to the next slide, because I want to show you. This is history of the Washington Square Arch. It says the outcome justifying the deed that Washington was referring to was the Revolutionary War. You remember we had that the America was founded on a revolution, on a war with Britain, right? Over taxation. Taxation. I guess some people don't like to pay taxes. So that's justifiable, right? You don't want to pay taxes to the king, so you can rebel, right? And you can have a war and start your own country, right? Well, that's what they thought. Let me read this to you. It says, the outcome justifying the deed that Washington was referring to was the Revolutionary War. No one wanted war then. Not only was it made near suicide for all who opposed the English, because remember, the British Army was much more superior and sophisticated than the American Army was. It says they considered it suicide, but also it says war causes a lot of death, which is also something that he didn't want. However, if the end result was freedom and liberty, then a horrible deed like war is in fact justified, it says. If we're going to have freedom and liberty, then all this blood we're going to shed justifies it. That's what he's saying. Well, where did George learn that? Where do you think did George watch TV? Was George Washington, our forefather George Washington, was he playing video games? Did they have video games back then? No, but they had media. They had print media. They had printing presses. They had newspapers. They had articles. They had books that he read that were written by individuals that told him, you are justified, George. One of them was St. Augustine. He was a student of Augustine, it said, that he read his writings, which made him believe that war was justifiable in some cases. Let's go to the next slide. Can you go back to that former slide? I want to make sure I covered everything there. Yeah, I didn't cover that. It says, Washington believed that unless the outcome is justified, then the deed shouldn't be done. And that's what launched the Revolutionary War, because he thought, well, he's taxing us to death. We don't want to pay those taxes, so we have a right to retaliate. Well, let me show you that I'm not making that up. Let's go to the next slide. Well, first, before I go to that, this is the Washington Square Arch right here in Manhattan that I just showed you. You see those troops that are marching through it after World War II? You know what they believe? They believe if you walk under that arch, if all the troops walk under that arch, that all the bloodshed that was on their hands has been washed, that they're clean from all the killing they did. That's why they march through arches like that. The Romans used to do the same thing. They believed it absolved them of all murder. I can go out and murder my enemies as long as the government gave me permission. As long as my government told me those are my enemies over there, and I walk through this arch when we get back, I'm forgiven for all my sins, I guess they call them sins. This is the U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Division parade passing the arch in 1946. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is the original Great Seal of the United States of America. You see what it says on it? It says, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. In other words, rebelling or resisting authority that are tyrants, that we consider tyrants because they're taxing us too much, is obedience to God if we do this. It's a just war. That was Benjamin Franklin that wrote that presented that first seal of the United States. We don't still have it, but you know what he used to justify it? There's a picture there of, he says it's the exodus of the Israelites getting away from the Pharaoh that was oppressing them. So he used that as, I guess he probably read Augustine as well. He probably thought that they were fighting a war against that Pharaoh on their way out of Egypt. But, of course, that's not what took place, but that's what they use as an excuse. So let's go to the next slide. So these things that I'm talking about, how are they put in our children's minds as honorable and glorious and wonderful and acceptable? Well, here you got American History for Kids with George Washington on the front, and you have, here's another book, The Founding of the United States, that they teach in schools, in public schools. Your children learn about it in public school. They learn all about war and how honorable it is to be a warrior. And the founding fathers are all lifted up as, our examples of courage and honor and, in the public school system. And again, I'm not coming down on Benjamin Franklin and I'm not coming down on George Washington. I just told you where they got their ideas. They too were influenced by somebody. Did I just tell you that? They've been influenced. They didn't watch TV. No, they didn't have video games back then. They didn't have a smartphone, but they had books. They had media. They had print. And they had word of mouth. They had friends that barked in their ear that told them, George, that old king over there, he's really getting out of hand. I really like what he's doing here. Let's go throw a bunch of tea overboard in the Boston Harbor and let's rebel and they had ideas. They read guys like Thomas Paine and other writers that were telling them the same thing. Hey, the Bible says that you're justified in overthrowing a king if they're a tyrant. If you consider them a tyrant, you can rebel against them. You can wipe out that government and start your own. This is what they were taught. Let's go to the next slide so I can show you. Oh, here's some other ways that we're learning. Our kids are learning war today. You see these war games? Let's go to the next slide. Because I thought I had, let's back up a couple slides. I think we might have missed one. Let's back up a couple. Can you back up on that slideshow? Back up. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay, yeah, I forgot to read this right here. On this Great Seal, this is actually from thegreatseal.com. It's a government website, actually. And it says, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. That was the original Great Seal of the United States. It says, this is written in the Declaration of Independence. In our Declaration of Independence, this is what is written. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it also says this: whenever a form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to initiate a new government. Do you know what that's saying to you? That if you don't agree with your government, read it carefully, it's giving you a license to rebel against the government and overthrow it. It's giving you the right in the Declaration of Independence. It's written right there. That Declaration of Independence is still valid today. It's telling you that if your government, you don't like your government because you think it's being a tyrant in some way, shape, or form, that you have every right here, it says, to overthrow and abolish that government, to rise up and resist. And overthrow it, in fact, through whatever means is possible. Do you see the deception? This is what we're being taught. This is what's being taught to our children today in the public school system, in history lessons, if they read the Declaration of Independence. So I guess they might read that in another way, you know, like if your parent is a tyrant, and they make you wash the dishes, and they don't let you have a smartphone, and they say that you can't have violent video games in your room, that you have a right to rebel and to rise up and resist mom or dad. Right? That's what they're telling them. We can say no, but that's what they're learning. I just read it to you. I just read you what our own our own Declaration of Independence says. And it's not been shredded, it's still hanging, and it's still being distributed everywhere today. And this is why war has become acceptable in the minds of people, and the people are confused. Okay? It's from education. It's coming from education and war. But we're going to turn that all around, right? Peaceful solution? That's why we're educating people, to show them that you're being tricked, you've been deceived, you've been confused. Got it? It's all a big con. It's a big con game, a big sham. You might call it a sham too, if you'd like. But my time's up for tonight, and our next class is going to be on 8/6/2025. That's Wednesday. It's also the anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. That's interesting. On 8/6/2025 at 5:30 p.m. I hope you'll all join us. Keep coming. It's great to see everybody. We'll see you next time.